Alright guys, my name is Goblin, and today I'm going to be giving you a detailed and concise 60 to 70 leveling guide for Classic or Legacy TBC. Today we will cover a number of different topics such as unique and useful leveling tips, optimal leveling build, playstyle for optimal kill time and mana efficiency, stat priority, useful Classic WoW trinkets and items to keep, and lastly we'll cover a little bit of a reputation priority. Just before we jump in guys, if you want to see more leveling guides coming very soon, please hit the subscribe button because that really helps out. You can also follow me on Twitch and Instagram. So let's begin counting down my top 10 unique and useful leveling tips to speed up and improve your leveling experience from level 60 to 70. First things first guys, mount speed. You can very easily increase your mount speed from the typical 100% that a mount gives you to a total of 114% mount speed with a combination of 3 very simple items which will speed you up considerably in the open world, particularly for when you get that 60% flying mount. The 3 items are firstly the carrot on a stick obtained from the quest Garzilla, which is from Zul'Farrak, the Mithril Spurs, which you can very easily buy on the auction house, and the Riding Skill Glove enchant. I'd also recommend stacking up a few swiftness potions to get out of interior locations a little faster, like caves and stuff like that. And to make the equipping process much simpler, you can get the add-on called Auto Carrot, which automatically equips everything whenever you mount up, and automatically equips your previous gear when you demount. Secondly, we have mob cleaving. A Warlock can very easily deal with 2 mobs at once, and with practice you can easily start to deal with 3 mobs at once by simply using the dot and fear trick. We'll talk a little bit about that in the playstyle section. Thirdly, you can save time collecting quest items and doing quest objectives by distracting your enemies. You have 3 methods to do this: either just send your pet in to take up all the aggro while you sneakily pick up the item, or you can use stuff like Fear, the Succubus's Seduce, or even Howl of Terror, which is an AoE fear. If you ever stop to drink as a Warlock, which will be very rare with the build I'm going to give you, you may as well command your pet to keep on attacking to save time while you drink. Next, let me draw your attention to the tier 1 set bonus for 3 items, which as it states, mana or health drained from drain life or drain mana is increased by 15%. This will become very powerful while leveling, so be sure to keep the items because it will stack over 26% when talented with Fell Armor, the 60% from the new Soul Siphon talent, and the 10% from Shadow Weaving, for a total of 111% for more health drained from drain life. You probably won't get to that total of 111% because you won't be using all of your dots on every single target, but nonetheless it is very useful. You need to be immediately setting up a pet attack and a pet return macro. As you can see on the screen, for optimal pet control, your pet should always be on passive and you should get into the habit of manually ordering him to attack. Don't forget about Curse of Recklessness. It is a very useful spell for dealing with humanoid enemies who run in fear when they are low health and then end up pulling back mobs with them, and then half of them offside along with them too. This is because it prevents the mob from ever running in fear. This is very useful in very tight situations, and you can also use it to cancel your own fear spell if that's going a bit, a bit ski-whiff. Remember, you can strafe between global abilities when you're applying your dots. You have about 1.5 seconds where you can't cast anything, so you may as well use the time to gain a little bit more distance on your enemy where it is safe to do so. Remember, you can use Curse of Tongues against deadly and irritating caster enemies. It will drastically increase the cast time of your enemy's casts, giving you sufficient time to interrupt them with a cheeky fear or a death coil. And lastly, always remember your health stones and your soul stones. So the next big question to answer is, what build should I go for? Imagine you're level 60, the new talents have been implemented, what should I respec into to get prepared for Outland? The build is an extension of the typical Drain tank build from Classic WoW leveling, and if you thought Drain tanking was good in Classic, into Burning Crusade it's even stronger. You will become an infinite mana killing machine with barely any downtime, if not no downtime, if you really do nail down the playstyle. So let's get a look at the build and cover some of the key talents. There is flexibility on your preferences based on whether you want to be better equipped for world PvP situations or have slightly more damage because you're on a PvE server, and you may as well at that point. So let me talk you through it. We're going to go into the affliction tree. Here we have the first tier, which you're going to max out corruption. You probably will not need the suppression talent because you're going to be decked out in raid gear, which will probably give you enough hit rating to not bother with it. Although, if you're going to a higher level zone to grind enemies, then you may need suppression. Next we have the second tier. We're going to pick up Improved Drain Soul, Improved Life Tap and Soul Siphon. So first of all, Improved Drain Soul. It actually works now. Returns 15% of your maximum mana if a target is killed by you while you drain its soul. You do not need to get the killing blow. Your pet can get the killing blow and you still get that 15% chunk of mana, which is really good. Next we have Improved Life Tap. Extra 20% of mana gained from your Life Tap, which also scales with spell power, so you're just going to get a ridiculous amount of mana back with Life Tap. It is really strong. Next we have Soul Siphon, which has been swapped from a basal 10% increase to an actual 60% additional effect based on how many affliction spells you have on the target. So what this very simply does is give you way more health generated from your drain life. Next we're going to max out Fel Concentration. It's the key talent that makes drain tanking work because it gives you 70% chance to avoid interruption caused when you're doing drain life. It's the only thing that really makes this build work, so you definitely have to get it. At this point you have options. My preference is to go for Nightfall, Grim Reach and then move on. You can go for Amplified Curse, you can get a little bit extra improved damage on Corruption and the Curse of Agony. It's really up to you. Next I'm going to pick up Siphon Life, and then Amplified Curse, which I would recommend, and then Curse of Exhaustion, because Curse of Exhaustion again is going to be useful when dealing with enemies, but also dealing with PvP enemies, because it's been buffed to a total of 30% movement speed reduction. From here you can put points wherever you want. You may want to put it in suppression if you're struggling to hit enemies, depending on what your gear is like or whatever. But anyway, we're going to move on to Shadow Mastery, max that out for the extra shadow damage and the extra amount of health drained from a drain life. Then we're going to just get Dark Pact. So the second you get that last point, you get Dark Pact, and then we're leaving the Affliction tree behind and moving on to the Demonology tree. But before we do that, I obviously do have to talk about Dark Pact. We're going to be using this ability a lot to drain our succubus's mana. The reason why we use a succubus is because it can do decent damage without actually having to absorb that much of its own mana, which means we can absorb a lot of its mana. This ability does scale with spell power, so although you see 700 mana there, you can very easily drain about 1000 to 2000 mana depending on what your gear's like from your pet, so it's very, very efficient at absorbing your pet's mana, returning it to you. And yeah, you just have pretty much infinite mana with this build, and it's just great. From here you're going to get Improved Health Stone, you're going to max out Demonic Embrace and Fell Intellect. The reason why we get Improved Health Stone, just because it's very simply good. I mean, we can't really complain about extra health from your Health Stone. It will come in useful. Demonic Embrace, we're just going to increase our health slightly, again to just get a little extra life tap. We're going to get Fell Intellect to increase the mana pool of our succubus, which means we can use Dark Pact more, get a little bit more mana out of the succubus. Then a very important talent here is to get Demonic Aegis, which improves the effectiveness of Demon Armor and Fell Armor by 30%. This will give you a little bit of extra health drain from your drain life. From here we're going to get Improved Succubus, mainly for that increase in Lash of Pain damage, because it's going to be good for holding aggro. And then we're going to finish off our points in Unholy Power. 4 points is what puts you at level 60. And then when you start leveling you're going to finish up Unholy Power. Max out Fell Stamina, although you can go for Fell Domination and Master Summoner if you don't want to go for Fell Stamina. Then from here, you may as well get 1 point of Fell Domination, but the key talent here is Mana Feed. So when you get Mana Feed, it makes your mana generation even more ridiculous. I have a video on this specifically. Basically, every time you use Life Tap, you give your pet mana, which then you can drain with Dark Pact. It quite literally gives you infinite mana. When you've got these two talents together, even in a raiding scenario, you can cast all of your abilities balls to the wall for about 20 minutes. You will not run out of mana with these two abilities. So definitely get that talent, and then finish off in Master Demonologist, and then it's Bob's your uncle, you're level 70. But those last two levels, that mana feed is going to be such a fundamentally useful talent. So now let's cover the playstyle for this build. Every person watching this video should at least aim to be killing 2 mobs at once, since it's so easy to do as a Warlock. First things first, set up a petattack and chill macro like I mentioned before, but you also want to set up a macro for your succubus's Lash of Pain ability. This is because you don't want the succubus to be spamming the ability and draining her mana, because you want to be the one draining her mana with Dark Pact. So take it off autocast and only use it once when your succubus engages combat to increase her aggro generation. So this is what the sequence is going to look like. You order your pet to attack the first mob with a Lash of Pain. You also apply Curse of Agony and Corruption to the target, and then you just leave it, okay? And then you have a little bit of a look about, and you find your second mob. Pull the second mob with Curse of Agony and Corruption, and then automatically put it into a fear. You can use 3 dots on the second target if you want to. You know, depending on the RNG, it probably will break, and if you use Siphon Life in that situation, you will pull aggro on the first mob, so don't use Siphon Life yet, use Immolation instead. Then you go back to the first mob, use Immolation straight into Drain of Life, which basically acts like a taunt, and then use Drain Life until the mob is very very low health, and then quickly swap back to Drain Soul for the 15% mana gain that it gives you when the mob dies. Then you order the succubus to attack the second mob and immolate into Drain Life again, just like before, and then you rinse and repeat that process over and over again. If you want to deal with 3 mobs, after you have dealt with the second mob and put him into a fear, just do the same with the third mob with the exact same method, but only use Curse of Agony on the first mob, otherwise the fear will, it'll break too soon, and then you'll have 2 mobs attacking you at once, which normally causes issues. You can risk putting 2 dots on the third mob, but it's really up to you. Definitely don't put Siphon Life up, because then you'll just pull loads of aggro. And that's a basic playstyle. Get your pet to deal with 1 mob while you fear and dot other mobs. It's pretty straightforward. You can also use Siphon Life for when you don't care about having aggro. If you've already got the aggro already, you may as well just use a Siphon Life to get a little bit of health and a little bit of extra damage, because it will like, you're not just relying on the health generation from Siphon Life, because it will also increase the health you get from Drain Life, so that's why it's so good. And if you have a little bit of extra mana to spend, you may as well use it. The Siphon Life will aggro probably all of the mobs that you're pulling, so be careful with it. I normally only use it when I'm drain tanking the third or second mob in the rotation, and when I'm, about to end combat basically. You should be using life tap frequently, because you never want your health to be at 100%. That would be a waste of time, because it should be sitting about between 75 and 100% constantly, otherwise you're just wasting the healing that you get from Drain Life. Only use Dark Pact in between pulls unless it's absolutely necessary, because draining mana from your pet generates a ridiculous amount of aggro, because he generates so much since it scales with spell power. It's basically a taunt ability, so be mindful about using it in combat. Remember to use Amplify Curse on Curse of Agony to increase its damage. I normally use it on the third mob because it almost turns it into 2 dots, but obviously without that increased chance to actually break the fear. Feel free to use Nightfall Shadowbolt procs for when they happen, but be mindful they will break fears and they will pull aggro, but it can be useful if you need to kill a mob a little bit faster. And remember to use Health Funnel between pulls and keep your pet's health topped up, preferably in Symbiosis with a bandage or Cannibalize. The last tip I'm going to give you is this macro. You can use it to automatically delete soul shards whenever you use Drain Soul, otherwise your bag will just fill up with too many of them. It can be very frustrating, so this will keep them cleared up. Now let's run into stat priority. So when it comes to stats, gear is way more standardized in TBC. Most pieces will have a decent chunk of stamina and intellect on them, and you will only have to worry about the secondary stats. And since crit and haste don't affect your dots, which is where most of your damage actually comes from, it makes it much more simpler for a Warlock, because you only have to worry about spell power and spell hit. The priority is spell power, then spell hit, and then it's just kind of meh, you just pick up whatever you can pick up. I'd also recommend holding on to your spell hit gear, because you will need a lot of it, and I mean a lot of it. It's the highest demand for any other class in the game for getting that hit cap for raid bosses, so definitely hold on to your hit rating gear. Now let's have a little look at classic WoW trinkets. What I'd recommend is for people to hold on to their trinkets, and because it can be very useful for leveling and raiding in TBC, and you can keep a collection of them in your bags and swap them in and out between pulls while you're waiting for the cooldown and for different situations. So first of all, we have Nefarian's Tear, which will be a very powerful item to hold on to. We have a Talisman of Thermal Power for a spell power boost, which is going to be very useful, especially as you can snapshot your docs. You've got the Black Book to boost your pet's damage and survivability. Definitely hold on to that one. You've got the Vanquish Tentacle of Cthulhu, can be very useful as a mini tank and for some extra damage. Have the Abyssal Shard, which can be used for a free Voidwalker summon, and we've also got the Mark of a Champion, which will be very useful against undead and demon enemies, to which there is an abundance of them in TBC. And lastly, let's talk about the reputation priority for a Warlock, so that you can decide which dungeons and questing hubs to do while leveling. Biggest priority in my opinion to get your Thralmar or Honor Hold rep as high as possible for the Spell Power Weapon reward, which will last you a very long time into tier 4 raiding if you're very unlucky getting the one from Gruul. So be sure to get those quests completed, although I would wait for them to get, I would wait for you to get to level 70 to be honest, because Hellfire Peninsula is going to be totally crazy at launch. The next priority should be getting Shatar Rep to revert for the Spell Power token, which means you should do questing in Neverstorm. And then Cenarian Circle is also pretty good to do, so you can do the quests in Zangamash for the Epic Ring with spell hit rating, which is very useful. And apart from that, all you really need is Scryer Rep, but you can only farm that by farming rep items, which is best left for when you're level 70, and it's the same with Keepers of Time, that's best left until you are level 70. Anyway guys, that's where I'm going to end the video there. My name is Goblin. To my next video, ciao.